And all of C5, I'm the guy that was in marketing and decided what the car had to do. I did all the 3 model strategies, you know, the Z06 was my baby. All that kind of stuff, did the pricing for the cars, the initial cars anyway. And I launched the car with the dealers and everybody else. I'm happy to say I'm a founding and life member of the museum. I do talks like this, I go to events, and you may have seen some of my articles in the magazines. By the way, once a little trivia, if you go outside the front entrance here, the bricks with the names on it, well, you'll see mine, you'll see my buddy Bob Applegate. But there's one sort of to the middle left. The day this museum opened, my former boss, who was Terry Turner, who was the Corvette brand manager at the time, proposed to his wife on the bricks out there. And there's a brick that says, her name was Elizabeth. It says, "Liz, will you marry Harry?" And so my buddy went and got champagne and put it in their room. My deal was to find the brick. And so it happened to rain that afternoon. So Harry let her off at the gate there. And I was standing on the brick like this, trying to sort of find where it was. And she comes in, and then Harry comes walking across the parking lot. And some spectator was reading all the bricks. And he read the brick, "Liz, will you marry Harry?" out loud. Oh, no. And so Liz says, you know, she was like, I said, "Look, Liz, you better act surprised when Harry comes up here." And she did, and they've been married ever since, so it's a good story. But that's, to me, if you talk about Corvette, that's a good example of Corvette. It's the family, I get pretty emotional about this, so I should go on, I guess. Reason I call this round and black is that when you work at a corporation like General Motors, in particular when there are people that worry about the cost of everything, they sometimes lose sight of the brand equity, the importance of brand to the vehicle. And I fought really hard to put Goodyear tires on C5 when we had some Japanese companies that wanted the business. And I remember talking to purchasing one day, and the purchasing expert said flat out, he said, "Tires are only round and black, that's all I worry about." And you and I know that tires are more than round and black, but that was his exact quote. One other thing I'd like to do, I should say up front, somebody asked me earlier about, can I tell them what kind of racing tire to use? The answer is no, this is not a racing tire discussion. It's to tell you how tires get chosen, how they get implemented, and then you may have some questions about tires, which I can tell you why it did or did not happen. But the key here is that I think the press and even consumers to some extent don't pay much attention to their tires until something happens. We all know the Firestone issue with Ford. If any of you had the early C5, there was a lot of complaint about the stiffness of ride on the EMTs. That's a complaint that was pretty visible. I don't know if any of you ever driven or had a CTS-V. I had the first version, and let me tell you, those tires had no wear. I never got over about 4,000, 4,500 miles per set of tires. And that's good. Well, it may be pretty good, but the deal there was GM, they wanted the car to compete against the 5 Series in terms of performance. They couldn't do it with the car, so they went and did better tires. And of course, the tires were stickier than hell. And I switched out into all-season tires, and then the car wouldn't stick at all. I mean, you couldn't go around the corner. Anyway, I would also argue, and I think it's safe to say that a lot of the improvements in your car is because of the improvements in tire technology. The engineers can do just so much, but when you've got a tire patch that the car's got to work on the road with, if it weren't for the tire engineers, you wouldn't have the performance levels that you have today. And of course, today's even more significant because of the fuel economy issue. And to GM's credit, I don't know of any manufacturer that doesn't put more sincere concern about tires. When you get a GM car with the tires, that tire works on that car and it's safe on that car. Every manufacturer does it in a similar fashion, so I'm talking specific to GM, but I can tell you everyone does it in a very similar manner. And the reason I know that is because I've worked a lot with Goodyear. At GM, it's called Tire Wheel Systems Group at the Milford Proving Grounds. They are the gurus of tires. They support all the vehicles, so they will take like a Tom Wallace, they'll join his team. They'll make sure that whatever car they're designing and working on, that they are simultaneously designing a tire that will work on that vehicle. They will assist the tire manufacturer. Remember, GM doesn't build tires, but they do have to buy them. So they will go to the manufacturer and make sure they can build a tire that we can buy and use. They do not buy tires from a tire company unless they've been qualified. They go to the manufacturing plant, they assure that the tires can be made in quantity and quality, and then they come back and say it's okay to buy tires from them. And then the other thing is, this one may sound a little bizarre. Whoops, I went back. I don't have to go back. I don't think I'm all right. Anyway, the point of it is, GM, for safety reasons and other reasons, has a lot of policy statements about tires. And one is that every car, truck, has to be able to accommodate tire chains. Now you say, why in the hell is that? Well, they don't want them to design a vehicle with the tire and wheel housing to be too close, because if you put chains on it, it'll whack the devil out. So C5 was the first Corvette that we got the tire wheel system guys to agree that we would not allow tire chains. If you look in your C5 manual, it'll say somewhere in the manual, do not put tire chains on this car. Now you may sound this kind of bizarre with sports cars, but that's a policy GM had, is that every vehicle had to accommodate. So if you ever complain about GM vehicles and that the tire doesn't look like it fills the wheel well out, trust me, that's probably the reason why it doesn't fill the wheel well. Let's see if I can get this thing away here. How do I get rid of this cursor here?
Look outside.
Let's see if I go.
Escape.
Here we go. How do I get? Oh, he's not up there.
Can you go to previous, or does it not move at all?
It's paying a little attention to me. It doesn't want to.
Select.
I can't figure it. Oh, there we go. Good deal. Thank you. Then there are other people that worry about tires too. Obviously, the platform, that would be the Corvette engineering team. And they have different mandates in their mind. First of all, weight. You may not think about it, but tires and wheels are heavy. Now, the good news, and the worst news, it's unsprung weight, which is worse for you. So they worry about mass. They obviously worry about cost, because they got to meet their program numbers. Timing is an issue. You'll see in a minute, I'll talk about how tires get done. And it takes probably at least a year to develop a new tire. And it takes about $1 million to develop a new tire. So if you've got a vehicle program that you're going to launch, let's say a year and a half from now, you got to start development of the tires about a year from now. So what happens is you've got to have the time to get it all done to be able to be available when the product goes to the market. Design staff is very concerned. I just mentioned the wheel well thing. Those of you that have the Grand Sports, there was that desire to put the big ZR-1 tires in the back end. And of course, when you do that on the small body, the tire sits outside of the wheel well, and there's different laws, state and federal laws, that say a certain amount of tire can't be exposed. And that's why we did the little jerry rig with the little wheel lip on the coupe Grand Sports. Marketing, that was me, basically. I worry about tire brand. There's really only one American brand left. I can tell you that I get a lot of criticism for other parts of your car that has Japanese parts on it. So we worry about the brand equity part. And by the way, besides the word Corvette, the brand of the tire is the only other thing you see on the car, right? And you see that every time you open the door. The tire manufacturer, that's important because they do the development work. And I'll tell you, with C5, there was a Japanese company that was trying to, well, I take it back, it's actually a Korean company that wanted the business. And I fought like hell, and Jim Perkins did too, to make sure we didn't put their tires on our car. But those are the players. It is a tedious deal. Think about this. Not only do you have about a year to do the work, you've got to have hot and dry weather, you've got to have cold and wet weather, you've got to have snow, You may not know this, but we shipped C5 Corvettes out to the Rocky Mountains because it's the only place we could find snow. We were running up and down the mountainous hills. You may also not know that C5 was sent to Australia because we couldn't find hot weather. Remember, the weather's got to accommodate when you're doing the car. So we shipped cars to Australia to do development work there because that's where the heat and stuff was. So you got to worry about your weather conditions as well as the timing issues. The car has to go fast, slow. It's got to go nice and snow. It's got all those things to do. And let me tell you, the type of tire composition you have, the tread pattern you have, all of that needs to be developed. They will make a tire with a particular tread pattern, run it around on vehicles. It doesn't work. They got to make another one. They got to make another one. The vehicle specifications are great. They need to know how big and heavy it is. That's why it's always nice to lower the weight of the car. How much horsepower you're dealing with. Packaging, we mentioned that. The spare tire issue. Did any of you understand why if you had a C5 convertible or Z06, why there was a funny well in the back of the car? Well, that was the original plan, was that on the quote, the Strippo version, the hardtop car, we were going to put a spare tire in it because it was cheaper than EMTs. And so instead of doing that, so that's why that funny shape's it, and it's the only place we could put a spare was to put that shape in it. Performance tire, okay, fitment, a tire wheel system, worried about new technology, and I'll mention that in a minute. If you've ever, engineering an automobile is inevitably trade-offs, and the trade-offs are very visible in the tire development. For example, fuel economy versus performance. All these Priuses running around have very low rolling resistant tires. They look like little bicycle tires. They're very good for fuel economy, but they stink for performance. Whenever you work for performance, I can guarantee you your fuel economy is going down. In today's world, with the new fuel economy standards, you're going to see a lot of tires, a lot of companies going away from performance tires as standard equipment. Wet, dry, we all know that story. A lot of race teams have slicks for dry weather and rain tires. When you buy a car with one tire, it's got to do both jobs. I'll show you in a minute about something on C5. Performance versus tire life. Again, I mentioned that. The mass versus the spare and the profile of the wheel. So it's the best example I know of engineering trade-offs in automobiles. This is an actual piece of engineering paper that came out of GM when we did C5, and I just want to point out the issue here. All we did is we were testing C5 cars and tires versus C4 to try to develop what we were getting at. And I want you to just point to this little thing down here. We talked about C4. Snow handling shows that C5 tires are down from C4. If any of you have a C5 and a C4, I guarantee you the C5 does a lot worse in particularly cold, icy weather, snowy weather, but does a little worse in the wet weather as well. So we knew that. We did the research, we did the test. We had a test where we went to Colorado and we tried to climb up hills with the regular production tires. The C4s all made it, the C5s never made it. So again, finishing this report, snow traction can generally, okay, where improvements to C5 tire snow traction cannot be made without compromises in other performance. This is the compromise part. So we decided not to improve the snow traction and keep it the same, but Goodyear would do mud and snows. How many of you knew that they had good mud and snows for your car? Hey, did you buy some?
No, but I remember when the Eagles got released, because I live on Tire Rack, and
Okay.
they had announcements for them.
Yeah, this is the actual letter from Goodyear, from the county executive saying that they were going to do snow tires for C5. My 98 convertible company car, I put snow tires on it, and it went like the dickens. Let me tell you, it was the coolest thing in the world. They were big knobby tires because they were true snow tires. And it looked kind of cool to have these big ass clunky old tires on it. But it was amazing what it would do with those tires on it. I doubt if they make them anymore. Because if they sold 10 sets, I'd be amazed. This is kind of cool. This is just some profiles of the original Corvette tire in '53 all the way up to the ZR-1 tire in '92. And both, obviously, the width of the tire, but also the profile of the tire. And then, of course, since then, we've got the new ZR-1 with even a fatter tire there. And so, in a minute, I'll go over the first tier. Corvette tires are the platform for tires, and the history really began with Goodyear, and now I guess you might argue that maybe Michelin's going to be part of that as well. I'll just quickly go through some things. I don't think you understand the significance of Corvette in tire development. These are true stories, every one of them. Obviously in 53, 54, but even 54, we came out with bias ply to tubeless tires. Went to nylon tires 62. We had this wide treads in 68. Then we went the first use of radial tires by Goodyear in 73. Gets better. We got the 60 series, which was phenomenal in 78. They introduced their Eagle brand in 80. That's what's on my 80 car. Then they did the first V-rated tire ever to be in production was on Corvette in 84. The first 16-inch passenger tire was on the 84 Corvette. 88, we had the first production Z-rated tire was on Corvette, 40 series. Then, of course, when we went into the ZR-1, the widest passenger car production tire and the first 35 series tire was showed up on Corvette on the ZR-1. Then in 92, the first use of directional and asymmetric tires. You know what that means when I talk directional asymmetric? When you ever try to change your tire, you can't go left or right, and now you can't even go front rear. But the first use of that was on Goodyear tires for Corvettes in 92. 94, the first OEM use of run-flat tires on standard rims. That was quite a leap forward in technology. Your standard Corvette rims could handle EMT tires, and no spare tire. In 97, the first use of 18-inch tires, and the first car line ever with 100% EMT usage. The supercar tire in the 02 Z06. In 05, we had the first exclusive use of run flats on all models. That was because, remember, the Z06 had a conventional tire with a little pump in it kind of thing, some foam. So this is the first use of that. And of course, in 06, we've got the new F1 tires, EMTs. And in 09, I don't know how many people know this, but though the new cars with active handling, when the tire goes flat, the car knows that and changes the algorithm for the active handling. And so it's trying to sort of save your bacon a little bit. You can't do all the little feats that you would do normally. The car sort of impacts you. Yes?
What does EMT stand for?
I'm sorry, extended mobility tires, run flats.
Oh.
I'm sorry, I should have explained that earlier. But the point of it is they've now integrated the tire function to the electronics of the handling system, which is quite an interesting thing. And now they, of course, went to the Michelin tires. They are EMT as well, the Pilot Sports, and of course they're big with the big tire. And the first use of 20-inch tires on Corvette. This is a relatively old picture, but it does show you the key elements of an EMT, a run flat. The real difference is these wedges, they call it, these side panels that basically make the tire able to support the weight of the vehicle with no air in it. And then you have the other big change is the bead structure has to be designed that when it's flat, it doesn't fall off the rim. So if have you ever changed your EMT tires? It's quite a task. They are really on there. And in fact, sometimes it's prone to getting wheel damage because they have to really pop the devil out of it. But that's what keeps the tire on the wheel. Have any of you run your car with flat tires? It's astonishing. I've had them on the test track with flat tires, and you don't know it. I mean, they're that good. I mean, there's no flapping, there's no noise. Once in a while, you get a little bit of a sort of a creaking noise, but I'm telling you, you can go quite well with the tire flat. Now, I don't recommend it. You want to get it fixed as soon as you can. The longer you go without fixing it, the less likelihood is you can repair it. And the other thing that the dealer or the tire guy probably doesn't say, but if, let's suppose your tire is a Z-rated tire. If you, Corvette, remember this 94 when we went to them, Corvette was suffering with fuel economy issues, mass issues, and we wanted to try the technology out with anticipation that we might use a new C5. So we needed, again, C4 cars don't have a lot of cargo capacity, so another so true, those were ZR-1s. Do you still have the little harness that goes in the back of your car? You know what that's for? Well, remember the tire, the spare tire goes under the back end of the car. And the ZR-1 rear tire was so big that it couldn't fit in that thing. So we had to, by law, the tire can't be a missile floating around in the car. So we give you this little harness, same way with the Grand Sports, the Coupe Grand Sports. There's a little harness to hold your rear tires under. And that's GM's way. Now, I guarantee you nobody ever uses it, but that's their way of saying you can secure your, the worry we have is the spent tire, not the, if you know, we introduced the WY5 is the run flat EMT option in 94, 95, and 96. These, we charge $70 for the option, and these are the actual penetrations for that over time. So customers were telling us they were willing to spend the $70, get rid of a spare tire, and this is how the penetrations went up in those 3 model years. So people were buying it, they did like the technology. We went out and did some research. You know, if you're a good marketing guy, you don't do anything without understanding your customer. And we asked the customers, would they buy EMTs without a spare tire if we charged them $400 for it? 78% of the customers said they'd buy the EMTs. Then we said, gave them a whole bunch of automotive technologies. Which technology would you like on your next vehicle? EMTs, run flats was the first most popular one. Then we said, if we put these on your car, what's your likelihood that you would buy the car? They, 89% said they wanted them and they'd pay extra for them. So the market was there for run flats. Why do we do it for C5? Well, C5 was getting a little heavy in the haunches, so we had to get weight out of the car. It reduces assembly operation in the plant. You don't have to install all that spare tire and everything. You just let the car go down the line. You don't have to have a jack. So a lot of weight is taken out of the car by not having a spare tire. And again, we wanted it as a marketing tool, luggage capacity, and I mentioned the spent road tire. This is a letter that I wrote. These are the way you get things done at GM. Basically, it says that it tells engineering that we agreed we'd have 100% EMTs on the car. Okay, this is going to bother a lot of you because I myself don't do what this says do. But I thought that since tires are so important and they're reasonably expensive, it might be useful to understand how you take care of your tire. So I went to my Goodyear friends and said, give me a lesson on tire care. And this is straight from the mouth of the tire guys. Keep them clean in and out. This is storage. This is whether you keep your car in your garage or you take it wherever you put your tires. Do not store anything black that's going to be heat sorted. That's pretty obvious. Also, don't put it on reflective surfaces where it'd be, you know, like sand or dirt or something. Obviously do not expose to any kind of solvents. This is interesting, and a lot of us store gasoline in our garages, and that fumes out of the gasoline can impact the the surface of your tire. They can hurt the life of your tire, the fumes. Now, you may not seem like it, but there's a lot of petroleum solvents that come off the stuff. Do not store within 50 feet of solvents. This is interesting. This probably refers to most people like a tire dealer. But if you have a generator in your garage or you have any kind of large electrical device, it creates ozone in its operation, which will deteriorate your tires. Obviously, direct sunlight. Better to store unmounted. I bet most of you don't have your tires unmounted, and I don't either, but best to store unmounted. Keep them in a dark, cool place, temperature range that they prefer. Now, this is interesting. They prefer you to store them, obviously, off the car, but they also understand most of us don't. Do all the other things. put the vehicle on blocks to remove the weight off the tires. I don't do that. If it's not, this is one that I think we don't think about. You know, you got extra crap in the back of your car, which adds weight. So while you got it stored, why don't you take all that stuff out and keep the car as light as you can? This is one I'm going to get more disciplined on. In your stored cars, you ought to go around once a month and check the air pressure and make sure they are up to what the manufacturer said. And because if you don't, you'll have premature wear. Move the vehicle every 3 months. This is impossible for me, but particularly because the cracking at the deflection points will make the tire be less durable. I got to take my own claim to heart. My forecast, as long as Corvette's around, you will see advancements in the tire technology that come to Corvette first. And as happens, Corvette does it first, and other manufacturers and other parts of Chevrolet do it second. And I've never had a topic that people don't have any strong opinions on in tires. Everybody has their favorite, which is great. But what I tried to bring to you today is a little bit of the technology that goes on in doing the cars with the manufacturer. So if you have any questions, that's me. Anybody can contact me anytime they want, and I can talk about Corvettes. Any questions? Yes.
You said you fought hard to keep Goodyears
Yes.
on the, was it C4s, C5s?
C4s and C5s.
What's your opinion, just personal opinion, I'm curious, on the going with Michelin's on the ZR-1?
I personally have no particular heartburn over Michelin's. Let me go back a minute. If you're a tire manufacturer, the business you really want is the high volume cars, high volume pickup trucks. That's the business you want. That's where you make your money. You make a ton of tires, make a ton of money. Corvette, if you think about Corvette, even if they produce 30,000 cars a year, it's trivial in the tire market. It's not even a pimple on the thing. So what happens is the tire manufacturers, but it gives them a lot of name recognition. I mean, think about it. You're the tire-owned Corvette, so you can. I mean, look how many ads you've seen of Goodyear where they got a Corvette in the picture. So it's a good ad thing for them. So what the problem we at GM ran into, you could argue it's not a problem, but to me it's a problem, is that Goodyear had been with Corvette since '78, 100%, and Goodyear's the only American brand. And anybody came in fact, we had a Korean tire company and a Japanese tire company say, we want your business, and they'll basically give you the tires. I mean, what's 30,000 times 4? It's not a lot of tires. And it gives them a prestige, it gives them some value from doing it. So that's part of the problem Goodyear has, is they need to make money doing it, and these other guys come in and say, well, we're going to give you the tires cheap. The other thing, and if you talk to Harlan Charles and the other guys, Goodyear hasn't had a lot of excess cash running around, and as I mentioned earlier, it's very expensive to develop a tire. And Michelin jumped into the pie and said, we're going to do it for you, and they put, everything I've heard says the tires are excellent, that they do what they're supposed to do, and Michelin was willing to give them the latest technology. It's another case of where Corvette's the first place to see the new technology. And it also got started a little bit, remember the race cars started using Michelin's.
Right.
And my friend Harry Turner, who I mentioned earlier, he was the GM person behind the beginning of the C5R race program. And I actually asked Harry one day, I said, Harry, why'd you guys switch to Michelin's? He said, look, he said, Goodyear didn't have the capacity to do the work we needed to do, the tire development, which I mentioned. Michelin stepped up. He said other manufacturers were winning on Michelin, so we had to go with Michelin. So that's how they got on the race cars. And then, of course, Goodyear wasn't able to step up for the ZR-1, and so they got on that. So my guess would be that if things happen and Corvette stays around a while, that the Michelins will probably find their way into the other vehicles as well. And they also don't have somebody like me who's so emphatic about brand image. So
there's another piece to it that is kind of hidden, and that's that we don't want to have tires from a supplier that won't work with us.
And a lot of these suppliers, it's take it or leave it. Here's our tire, you use it, that's it. And the suppliers we work with will work with us, and typically, if we're gonna do a new tire, we'll go through 100 submissions. I mean, I'll be riding 5 sets of tires a day for a month, and then we'll tell them, this is what's wrong, and they come back, next month I got another set of tires, 10 sets of tires. And some of these guys like Michelin, this is what we got, that's what you use, or you don't use it, and we can't work that way.
From the expert, good words. Any other questions about tires? Yes, sir.
I know that a lot of tuning went into the, later C5 and C6 to optimize the suspension around the EMTs. Can you talk a little bit about that side of the tire? They designed the tire in conjunction with the suspension design.
I'd say the answer is yes, they do. They try it in all cases because it's a complete package if you think about it. You just don't stick a tire on it and go. And as I mentioned, it's a big compromise, and so you might give up a little bit of ride quality to get performance quality that you're looking for. And you redo the shocks, and I think as shown with C5, as C5 went through its life, I think the engineers enhanced the suspension system, so it ended up being a much better riding car. Oh, by the way, I was talking to, you got a question?
Yeah, is there a Dennis Nadell in here by chance?
Dennis Adele?
Okay, that's all I
Okay.
can think of.
I was talking to Harlan Charles about the C6 car and the tires, and he said that with C6, they had a couple goals in mind. One was to reduce some of the noise that you got from the C5 tires. They were a little noisy. In some road conditions, they were really noisy. And they wanted to soften up the ride a little bit on the base car. So they gave that parameters to Goodyear and said, okay, if you want the business, as Jim's saying, we need to make the ride a little quieter on the base car, and we've got to soften it up. So they worked with the composition of the tire, they worked with the sidewall, and then they worked with the chassis engineers to put that package together. That's why when people tell me they suddenly put a Michelin tire on their car and it goes better, I trust my GM engineers more than that, because I think the package that GM comes up with is probably the best compromise at that point in time. Now, if you've given up, if you as a driver want to give up something to get something else, then that's your choice. But I think GM does a good job. Oh, here, quick.
One of your early slides, you have there the miles per gallon versus performance.
Yep.
Could you maybe just expand on what you mean by performance? Because I think every one of us probably...
Good question. I would say in performance there, you're primarily talking about traction and stickiness, ability to go around a corner. Jim may have a better terminology, but if the tire's sticky and wide and flat, it's probably going to have very high rolling resistance, which means fuel economy is not going to do well. Am I wrong about
A lot
that?
of trade-offs there. You got rolling resistance, you got tire life, the whole 9 yards. I mean, you're trading tire life when you get performance too. Just
The high performance tires typically wear really fast. I mean, I can make you a butyl tire and stick like glue, but it's going to go away next week.
So would that be part of the performance envelope?
Of course.
Yes, sir.
You said the run flat was offered in 94,
Yes.
but it was not an option on a ZR-1 or I assume on a Grand Sport? Because
The answer question is, what about the option of run flats on 94, 95, 96? And the answer is, you're correct, because of the ZR1 package size and stuff, it was not done. Again, remember, Goodyear had to develop a run flat tire, and they're not going to run it for a car that sells 1,000 units a year. So they were focusing on the volume of Corvette cars. But it was an available option. And I don't know if this will be a good trivia question for it. When you go out down the road behind a C4 Corvette, to me this is one of the coolest things about the run flats. Typically you see the wheel well that holds the spare, that bucket thing that hangs down. On the run flats, that wasn't there. So you see the axle spinning, you see all the cool stuff under there. So it's much more of a mechanical look. And so I just love that look on the C4s that don't have run flats, that do have run flats.
But they have to have that crash bar though for?
No, it's, I'm telling you, you see you see all the stuff spinning back there. It's real, it's cool look to mine. And if you,
What nobody was talking about though was we had to redo our rear barrier test because the spare tire.
The spare tire is a significant piece in rear barrier tests, and when you take that out, you get a whole different crash profile. And we had to redo the whole rear end of the car to pass without a spare tire back there.
that's the engineer talking, but it's absolutely true. That when you make that, what seems to be trivial change, it's not so trivial when you're an engineer and you have to worry about meeting standards.
This is sort of a detailed question. Maybe Jim would know more, but when the GSC tires came out and were introduced in '92, right, on the Corvette, was the suspension softened up so that performance was kept as a constant, and then the customer got a better ride with the same level of performance with a better tire?
We don't do isolated elements. We try to work everything as packages. So basically, the engineer releasing the tires and the development engineer work together to decide what they wanted to build, and there really isn't ever particularly an intent to carry over a particular performance characteristic. It's just, you know, this is where we're at, this is where we want to be, and that's what we're working on. And there's not a lot of hindsight in the game.
Yes, sir.
The shelf life of a average tire, I was heard it's like 5 years, being it on the shelf on your car.
I've heard similar things. It's talking about shelf life of tires. I've heard similar things, you know, and I guess the question would be, what are you going to do with the car? If you're going to take it out on the track and do stuff, or you're going to go silly speeds, then sure, you want to put new tires on the car. But funny story, I have a 1980 L82 that had about 5,000 miles on it. And on the Motorama tour that GM had, I came to the museum, drove down, drove back to Detroit, and the car had whatever 5,000 to 6,000 miles when I got it. When I did the tour, and everybody kept looking at it and said, "Man, that's original tires." And sure enough, they're original tires. Now, I will say this: we didn't go 80, 90 miles an hour. We were cooking along maybe 60, 65. And my buddy came over and we checked all the tires and all the spares and all the stuff. But I probably wouldn't do it again, but partly because I'm going to save the tires for, you know, for show stuff. So, but yeah, they were still working. But again, they're in pretty good condition. They're not driven. They're just sitting around minding their own business. Yes, sir.
I know that you have manufacturing costs in C5, and it seems that the EMTs that came with the vehicle they knew appeared to be, from my perspective, a cost-cutting move. Is there a tire that, as we can hear outside, horrible in the rain, might as well have slicks on it?
Okay, the question, I don't know if you were here earlier, the question was about C5 tires, and that early on they weren't good typically good in the rain. Again, I can tell you the reason for that was there were certain dry handling characteristics that we wanted to achieve, and we didn't have the time or the money to get a tire that would do both. And so we consciously made a decision that we would go for dry performance numbers and let some of the other things, particularly snow use, go away. Again, a lot of race cars have rain tires and slicks. It's a very obvious reason. So.
The other half of the question would be is that Chevrolet, Corvette, the cost-cutting move, chose a tire, and if you're lucky, you got 20,000 miles on it.
First of all, I think your premise is incorrect. I'm not sure it's a cost-cutting move to do that. It's just as Jim mentioned earlier, if you're striving for certain levels of performance, one of the things you give up is tire life. If you want to get 50,000 miles tire life on your Corvette, go buy a high-profile tire with very high sidewalls, skinny tire, you know, and it'll with not much traction, and it'll go a long ways.
Well, let me last say that, I decided early on, when it was time to replace the run glass on around 18,000 miles. I set a Toyota Proxys 21Rs, which I got a little over 76,000 miles on.
I don't doubt that they're tires that'll give you better
They
wear.
look very much like the Goodyear GS, F1 GSD Bridge.
Are they run flats?
Non-inflow.
Okay, and see, that's another compromise. You've decided you want a car that was designed to have run flats, and you're going to run it without run flats. So that's your choice, but then you got to worry about what to do when the tire goes flat. I can't say enough. Of all the things that GM does, or has done, I really tell you that my experience in the tire business is that they are very good at it. They care a lot, and they understand the trade-offs. And I was part of the trade-off guy. When we saw the performance of those tires in the dry versus the snow, I said, I'm willing to give up some of the snow to get the dry. And I mean, that's just a decision that I was part of making. I agreed with it. Now, over time, they are finding how to get a little bit better of each, but each year the tires change. Any other comments? Yes, sir?
MS tires versus, say, winter tires, is there a difference? Like, is an MS tire really just an all-season tire?
There's sort of three broad categories. There's what I'd call performance tires. And Americans, for some silly reason, have really got hung up on all-season tires. And then there's what I'd call winter tires or snow tires. I mean, I'm old enough to remember, I lived in Virginia where we didn't get a lot of snow, but every fall, my dad, myself included, put snow tires on every car we had, and that was standard operating procedure. Now the tire companies came up with sort of a mid-type tire called the all-season, which has reasonable snow usage, but really isn't a snow tire. But I can tell you that they're engineered to do different things. I had a CTS-V, which I ran the supercar tires on it, the standard tires. As I told earlier, I got less than 5,000 miles to a set of tires, but the car stuck like Dickens. I had a set of snow tires in wintertime, and the car went extremely well in the snow. And then I got so tired of changing tires, I went to the all seasons. The first time I had the car on the road, I almost lost it because I didn't appreciate how little stickiness they had. I mean, I literally lost it in the corner. I thought I was going to lose the whole car. The fun factor was there, though, because I could trip the tires in every gear. I really could. I mean, I could spin the tires in every gear. I couldn't do it with the supercar tires. They were so sticky that it would not do it. But I got no tire life. I mean, literally no.
The reason I was asking is that we're from Canada, and I drive my car year-round, and I had a bunch of snows on it this past winter, and I got stuck in a snowstorm, and it was way beyond white knuckle driving.
Well, you were driving a Corvette?
Yeah.
My experience in Corvettes is snow, and when I was working at GM, my company car was a Corvette, so I drove it 12 months out of the year. The problem with Corvettes in deep snow is you ended up bottoming out, and then whatever kind of tire, it doesn't matter because you just can't go. But my experience with snow tires on Corvette was very positive. Now, I didn't take it out when there was 50 feet of snow out there, but the type of snow we got in Detroit, it never stopped me with snow tires on it.
Goodyear makes excellent snow tires that fit Corvettes, and don't tell anybody I told you this, but if you go to the proving ground in the winter, you won't find a Corvette on some regular street tires. You'll find them on 4 snow tires.
Is C6 out? Because I looked and I couldn't find it.
Well, I'm not sure, I don't know, what year car do you have?
2005.
Yeah, I don't, oh, well, that's a C6.
Yeah.
So
We have a 94, and it has proper winter tires on it, and it's not a problem at all.
Yeah, I can't speak to whether Goodyear or anybody else makes snow tires for a C6. My guess is no, because again, if they sell 10 sets a year, I'd be surprised.
Dave Wickham's car had one last winter. He drove a C6.
Did he have C6? I'm telling you, they work. They absolutely work. And I'm, again, having experienced it real time and knowing my early life experience, if you're going to do much in the snow, you really need snow tires. Americans are just either too cheap or too lazy. I don't know what the right answer is, but yeah. Any other tire question? Anyway, yes, sir.
So back to you with an answer that when I drove my C4 in 90, I worked in a climate that was got snow, and I only had one vehicle. What you can do is just change over, switch over to Blizzak
Sure, I mean, there's obviously certain tires that have more function, but if you really want to have to do snow thing, to me, the only solution is snow tires. Okay, thank you very much. Hope you had a decent time. If you need to call me, you have my number.